For this project, the task was taken on of looking at the difference between velocity, time, and acceleration for a paper airplane that is made from different materials. To do this, one would be folding paper planes of these three materials and testing them by tracking them using the Video Physics app on the school iPads. The purpose of this project was to find out the effect that a paper plane's material had on its velocity, acceleration, and time that it spent in the air. To obtain the data about velocity for the different planes, it was only a matter of observing the velocity time graphs produced by the iPad. From those, one could compare the different materials. Here is the graph that was obtained. From this, one can see that the lightest plane, which was the tinfoil one, had the biggest difference between the initial and final velocity. One can observe that the card paper has the second highest velocity, something that was not expected in the hypothesis.
For calculating the average acceleration, the formula average acceleration equals final velocity minus initial velocity over time was used. The values for the velocity and time were observed out of the data table. In this table are the results of the calculations. Even though some trials show a positive average acceleration, the mean average values of the average acceleration for all three planes were negative. From this bar graph, it can be observed that the tinfoil plane slows down the fastest. The average acceleration of the printer paper plane and the card paper plane is almost the same. The printer paper plane only decelerates more by negative 0.02 meters per second squared. Assuming that the tinfoil plane is the lightest and the card paper plane is the heaviest, it can be determined that the lighter the plane, the faster it slows down, meaning it has the greatest negative acceleration.
To calculate the time, the numbers were taken off the position time graphs produced by the iPad.
After gathering all our times from the graphs on the iPad, the calculations were made to calculate the average time for each material. These results ended up agreeing with the hypothesis. The lighter the plane, the longer it was in the air for. In this case, the tinfoil is the lightest and it stayed in the air for the longest time, while the heaviest, the card paper, stayed in the air for the shortest amount of time. The data collected only agreed with some of the statements in the hypothesis. The part about velocity was partly wrong, and the part on acceleration was very wrong. The only data that fully agreed with the hypothesis was time.
The reason the velocity values only partially agreed with the hypothesis was because the hypothesis was not specific enough. It stated that the lighter the plane, the greater the velocity, but through experiments, it was proven that the lightest plane had the biggest difference between the initial and final velocity. These two ideas are very different. The average acceleration for the three different planes were all negative, meaning the planes decelerated. This was not stated in the hypothesis. The fact that the tinfoil plane decelerated the most agrees with the hypothesis. As stated before, the time aspect of this whole experiment agreed with the hypothesis written.